Good afternoon, everyone. Buenas tardes a los que están aquí, que hablan español. Si pueden empujar el botón abajo donde dice Interpretation para que puedan empezar a escuchar este mensaje en español. Thank you very much, everyone, for being here. My name is Rose Gudiel Escobar. I am one of the California co-chairs, and in behalf of California Poor People's Campaign, we welcome you and thank you for being here with us. In this webinar for the voting is Power Unleashed. Today, we aim to provide you with valuable voting information as you're getting ready to go out and vote. We are so excited to have our keynote speaker, the National Poor People's Campaign co-chair, Reverend Dr. William Barber II with us. We also have information on 7 propositions that you will be voting on. And we are also going to have some updates on our We Must Do More campaign. Once again, thank you. We will now go ahead and get started. Reverend Beth, can you please get us started with some prayer?
Thank you, Rose. I'm happy to. And good afternoon, everyone. It is wonderful to see you all with us today. I'm the Reverend Dr. Beth Johnson. My pronouns are she, her, and I am one of the co-chairs of the California Poor People's Campaign, and so glad that you could join us. I'd like to begin today by acknowledging that where I am in Vista, North San Diego County, that I'm on the stolen land of the Luiseño and Kumeyaay nations. This acknowledgement comes with the imperative to not only acknowledge and learn about the people who continue to live on this land, but to act in solidarity as the need for justice is ongoing. And I encourage you to learn about the land wherever you are on as well. Now, as is my practice, I would like to invite you to take a breath with me, to ground and center ourselves for the work ahead. Breathing in, we acknowledge our connection with all that has gone before us. Breathing out, we acknowledge our connection with one another and with all that lives here and now. Breathing in and out, we acknowledge the ongoing nature of our interconnectedness and the fact that what we do here and now will help shape the future. Remembering Dr. Barber's question to us these days, if you had 48 hours left, what would you do with your last breath? A colleague of mine, the Reverend Judy Wells, as she was dying, it was her last wish to be able to cast her vote. And she died a day after she did do early voting. I invite you in that place of silence and honesty. Will you pray with me? Spirit of life, Spirit of love, Spirit of justice, we gather together today in a time of tumult and chaos with violence and threats toward people, the earth, and our democracy that fosters fear and uncertainty. We come together committed to the work of love, a radical justice love that says everybody in, nobody out. We respond to love's call to dismantle systemic racism, poverty, the war economy, ecological devastation, and that false narrative of religious nationalism. We come today to learn together, to be inspired by one another and by Dr. Barber. We come together to learn to be more faithful in declaring that now is the time for us to do more and to be more together. Amen.
Ashe. Arne.
Greetings all. I'm happy to be here with a message of hope, inspiration, and to get you fired up for this season. Don't believe the hype, believe your heart. This song says, when we all vote, we use the power, our superpower, to change the world. Here we go. When we all vote, the course of our future. So many died for us to do it. When we all vote our superpower, oh, we can change the world, change the world. Come on now, and watch what can happen when true democracy is in action. When we all vote our superpower, oh, we can change the world, change the world. Our vote is our power. Put those hands together if you know it. Our vote is our power. Put them together. Our vote is our power. Yes. Our vote is our power. Put it up for Fannie Lou. Hey. Put it up for Fannie Lou and all the ancestors who paved the way for us to do what we do now. Oh, we use our superpower. We use our superpower. We use our superpower. Woo! Hey, that's when America is greater. When everybody can be loved to their neighbor. When we all know our superpower can change the world. It can change the world. When we all go together, we stand. Oh, keep it hand to hand. When we all go, our superpower can change the world. Do you know it? I know it. I'ma show it. When we all vote, our superpower. When we all vote. Thank you very much. Go forward and do what needs to be done.
Beautiful, beautiful, Arne. Hi, everyone. My name is Melissa. If you have questions, please put them in the chat and your email, and we will respond to them via email. Next up is the voting obstacles, solutions, and making a plan. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Nancy Berlin, and I'm with the Los Angeles Poor People's Campaign. And my job right now, along with Shannon Rivers, is to encourage all of you to vote and to get others to vote too. We know there's lots of things you might worry about: voter suppression, intimidation, misinformation, false drop boxes, and whether ballots will be counted at all. And of course, then there's the pandemic, which makes everybody nervous. So the best way to overcome all of these fears and worries is to know your rights and have reliable resources on hand. And then you can make a plan that works for you and that you feel comfortable with. So we have some slides to show you to help with that. You don't need to scribble down all the information. We'll make the slides available to you. So Jim, if we could have those slides, that would be great. So the first thing to do is to make sure you're registered to vote, because of course you can't vote unless you're registered. And there's a link here. The first one is to check your voter status, because sometimes we slide off the list and we don't even know. So make sure you do that. If you do need to register, you can do it online at the next link that's up here. The deadline to register either by a paper form or online is tomorrow, the 19th. So make sure you get on that right away. But California does have a fallback position in case for some reason you don't get that deadline. We have something called conditional voter registration, which means that you can register to vote right up to and including election day, November 3rd, and still, if your voter registration is deemed correct, you can still have your ballot counted. So once you've done that and make sure that you're registered to vote, the next thing to do is to figure out a way to vote. And there are a couple of different ways to do that. The first one we're going to cover is vote by mail. So that's the next slide. The good thing is that every registered voter has been mailed a vote by mail ballot, and there's no stamp needed for that. It just needs to be postmarked or received by the post office or the registrar by election day. When you get your vote by mail ballot, make sure to read all the instructions carefully. Use a blue or black pen, sign and date the envelope before you put it in the mail. And one of the big advantages of vote by mail is if you're worried about the pandemic and getting sick, or if you have health problems, you don't have to be in contact with everyone. And it also gives you a little bit more time to make a decision without being pressured by others. Because there's been a lot of concern about drop boxes that might not be official, we've included a link here to show you where you can find your official drop box if you want to drop it off in a drop box rather than at the post office. Another option for voting is early voting, which is the next slide. Every county has one or more early voting locations, and those begin 4 days before the election, the weekend, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday. Some of them are even open earlier. Some counties are opening early voting earlier than that. So because it's different in every county, we've included a link for you to look up your county elections to get the specific information for where those early voting sites are. One reason to vote early is on election day, the polls could be crowded and you might have to wait a long time. Which brings us to the next slide, which is voting in person or voting at the polls on election day. A lot of people really like to do this because those get counted right away and they're used to voting that way. A reminder, the polls are open on election day from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. We have 3 different ways for you to look for where your polling place is: by an 800 number phone number, online, or by texting. One really important thing, nobody ever wants to have a problem, but you need to know that you have the right to vote if you are still in line at the polls when the polls close. So don't let anybody tell you to go away. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Shannon Rivers.
Let's go to the next slide, Jim. So you don't need a home to vote. To register to vote, simply describe where you stay and give mailing address such as a friend, family member, or a neighborhood center. Vote by mail at an early voting site with a provisional ballot. Next slide, please. Track your ballot. Where's my ballot? We always have concerns about where's my ballot. Let voters know where their ballots are by mailing. By mail ballot is its status every step of the way. Sign up with where'smyballot.sos.ca.gov to receive automatic text and voice notifications. Next slide, please. And then how to report election voter complaints. This is really important, guys. So make sure that you, if you believe you witnessed a crime or believe you are a victim of fraud, you can send your complaints into the office of the California Secretary. If you click right on that web link there, it'll automatically put you up to the California Secretary website. Or you can election protection, 1-866-OUR-VOTE, 1-866-687-8683. And then I believe we have one more slide. That's it. Okay, thank you, guys.
I just want to remind everyone, if you would like to donate, you can go to the California Poor People's Campaign GoFundMe page or send a check to the fiscal sponsor, ITINA, ETINA, at 2010 Linden Avenue, Venice, California, 90291. And that information is also in the chat. Thank you.
Okay, we're gonna have a video now on voting from Maureen Taylor, who is with the National Welfare Rights Union. Jim?
And it's gone on far too long.
Good afternoon and hello to all of my colleagues. It's so wonderful to see you all. There's a reason why Reverend Liz and Reverend Barbara are co-chairs of this movement and of this activity, and I'm not. There is a reason. They bring a spiritual foundation to this fight. And I probably have a spiritual component in me, but I can't find it because of the immoral approach that's used across this country that dictates how we treat each other. It's just scandalous.
That's right.
I live in Michigan and I serve as the state chairperson of the Michigan Welfare Rights Organization. And last night at midnight, the protections that were offered to individuals to keep them in their homes because they couldn't pay rent, and they couldn't pay rent because of the virus. Those protections ended at 12:01 last night. And we got some 10,000 households just in Detroit that are now up for what can we do to keep in our places where we live. Now, we've got some programs in place. We've got some individuals, some elected officials that have some things that they're moving around to help those 10,000. But I live in the Wayne County, and there are 83 other cities that live where I live, and none of them so far have been offered any further protections. And what have they done wrong? They didn't do anything wrong. The virus showed up. We have no national leadership. We are on our own. New York does what it wants to do. Michigan does what she wants to do. California does what they want to do. And across the nation, we have nothing but total chaos. And who is the brunt of all of this madness? And it's the low-income Indian, the low-income Negro, the low-income Hispanic, and the low-income white person. And those are the descriptions of the persons that are holding on by just by their very teeth. We've got 10,000 households involved in this. And one of my friends told me just the other day, use this phrase. And it's a rural phrase. It's called culling the herd. And I hadn't heard that in a long time. And when you're talking about culling the herd, what that means is those animals who are weak, not wanted, don't look like the rest, don't think like the rest, don't feel like the rest, it's all right for them to be disadvantaged and let go. And that's for sure what's going on. I serve on the governor's task force for racial disparities. And it's incredible to believe that in the year 2020, we still have African Americans dying of higher rates on the COVID test. And it just goes on and on and on. So as we talk about this moral public policy agenda, we don't have to be hamstrung by old comments that used to say, we can't do that. We can't do that. We can't fund this. We can't imagine that. None of those things exist anymore. We live in an economy that allows technology to make certain that we can get whatever the heck we want.
That's right.
We raised this question of we have to have affordable housing. We could do that by the end of August. If we say we need universal health care, we could do that by the end of September. If we say we need nutritional food for everybody, California and Florida, if they stop spreading the COVID, can feed the entire country. We can finish that by the end of October. When we talk about the need for education from birth to death, by the end of the year, we should be able to finish that. So I urge all of the folks that are on this line and people that will hear these comments, it is better to listen to Reverend Liz and to Reverend William than listen to me. Because if you take on what they're telling you and coming through the spiritual door, that is a much better position. I'm a social worker by trade. It's called the social workers together. We know how to put the list of whatnot together. If you don't listen to them, then you're going to be forced to listen to me. And I got a message for you. Thank you so very much. My name is Maureen Taylor. I serve as state chair of Michigan Welfare Rights. Listen to my colleagues so I don't have to come to your state.
Amen. And Maureen, I want you to know, if they don't listen to this, I'm joining you.
I ain't mad at you, Reverend.
I told folk, we're trying to do it the right way. We're pushing it the right way, but do not think that we won't be in the streets and do massive nonviolent civil disobedience. Only thing right now, we're not doing it because of COVID, and we're not going to put ourselves there. But be very clear, we with you, Sister Taylor.
I'm there, sir. I'm there.
And it's all righteous. It's all righteous.
All right.
Take care. Thank you, Maureen. Thank you for your love and your wisdom.
Somebody's hurting our people, and it's gone on far too long, and we won't be silent anymore.
So thank you very much. My name is Faye Wilson Kennedy. I'm one of California's co-chairs. And today, if Jim can go ahead and put up the first handout. Today, I'm just going to briefly introduce you to the 7 propositions that we will be reviewing as part of the webinar today. We're not going to tell you what to vote for or what not to vote for. What we would like for you to do is to vote, to conduct your own research. So today, you will be listening to speakers talking about Proposition 15, the property tax. It's also known by the School and Communities First. Proposition 16, repealing the ban on affirmative action. Proposition 17, the voting rights for felons. Proposition 20, recategorizing criminal sentencing charges. Proposition 21, rent control. Proposition 22, job classification for app-based drivers. And then finally, Proposition 25, replace cash bail with risk management. So you will be hearing from each person throughout today, talking about each one of these propositions. Thank you very much. And next is Rose.
Good afternoon, everyone. Yes, can you please play the quick clip before I start on Prop 15?
Who supports schools and communities first? Nurses and doctors on the front lines of public health. Teachers and parents who know children need smaller class sizes. Mayors and county supervisors whose budgets have been devastated. Small business owners who need tax relief. Who opposes the initiative? Trump's biggest California donors, massive out-of-state railroads, billionaire developers. They want special loopholes for them, not what's good for all of us.
Thank you for that. Could you put my presentation up, please? Thank you. Thank you. So this is the Prop 15, which is the schools and communities first. And go ahead to the next slide. I'm going to go over what exactly Prop 15 is. But before I start, a lot of the times you're going to be hearing this from corporations saying, oh, you don't want this because it's going to increase your taxes. If you have a small business, you're also going to be affected by that. But in reality, this here is what Prop 15 is. Prop 15 is amendment to a Prop 13 that we had that was initially done to help us with our taxes during a time that we were having, we were losing our homes because of that. So basically now here comes Prop 15 that is supposed to close the property tax loopholes that these wealthy corporations have been benefiting on, cut small business taxes, reclaiming billions every year to investment in our schools and local communities. It's going to exempt, and this is very important because this is where they try to get us. It's going to exempt homeowners, renters, small businesses in agricultural land so they continue to be protected by Prop 13. And this also is very important, that it prioritizes transparency and accountability by requiring public disclosure of all new revenues and how they are going to be spent. So we, the people, you know, if this passes, we will have transparency. We will be holding them accountable to let us know what this new money is and how it's going to be spent. Thank you. And now I will go ahead and pass it on to Reverend Eddie, which will speak on Prop 16.
Good afternoon, California. Good to see you all again, and great to be in the house. I have to start with scripture because I'm a reverend. I just remind you that God spoke to Micah, the prophet, one day, and told Micah that you know what to do, to love justice, to do justice, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with God. And so when I'm talking about Prop 16 and 17, I'm talking about racial equity, talking about equity on the ballot. Prop 16, sisters and brothers, is the reinstatement of affirmative action. California is one of 9 states that bans affirmative action. Now, you may be asking, what is affirmative action? Affirmative action says when you apply to college or when you're applying for that good civil service job at the post office or at the city, that they can look at and see your gender, your race, maybe your sexual orientation. All those things can be included in consideration for if you get the job. Right now, 1996 Prop 209 passed in 1996, and it said we don't need affirmative action in California. And what we've seen in California is a decrease in the enrollment of African-American students in the California university system. What we've seen is a decrease in people who have been kissed by nature's son and in places like the civil service, like the post office, or maybe in city halls, maybe across the county. So Prop 16 just asks the question, do we believe that racial equity should be a priority? I can't tell you what the answer to that is, but if you believe that racial equity be a priority, I highly suggest you look at Prop 16. People who are for and against Prop 16, there's tons of civil rights leaders who are for this. There's tons of grassroots activists who believe that somebody's been hurting our sisters and brothers and they're discriminating based upon race, gender, sexual orientation, and we don't have to be silent anymore. You do what you will with that. The other measure I want to talk to you about is Prop 17. If anybody out here believes in second chances, Prop 17 says that if you are on parole in California, so currently in California, if you have a conviction or a record, but you're off parole, you can vote. You have the franchise of voting. But if you are on parole, then you don't have the franchise of voting. I will remind you that the 13th Amendment in our Constitution allows for slavery in one case, if you've been locked up. Well, we continue that by saying that you don't get to vote, and your vote is your voice, and your vote tells you you can have hope. So Prop 17, yes, vote on Prop 17 says if you are on parole, you too should have a vote, that you did your time, and we see that you've done your time, and that now we want to make sure that you have your voice about what happens in your neighborhood, what happens on your streets, what happens with your tax dollars, what happens to your life and to sentencing. A no vote says that if you have parole, that you may have paid your debt to society, but you are a bad actor. We don't want to have you voting with the rest of us. You're not as good as the rest of us. I can't tell you where to vote in either of these propositions, but I will just remind you that Micah says that you must do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly with our God. I think these two propositions put racial equity right back at the heart of our democracy, right back at making California becomes the golden state, which follows the golden rule and treats their neighbors as you treat yourself. You do what you will, and now next up is Margaret.
Okay, thank you so much, Pastor Eddie Anderson. And this is Margaret Prescott along with Melissa Monteleone. We are co-MCs today to help to move us along here. So what I'd like to do now, and we're both with the Poor People's Campaign in Los Angeles. I'm also part of California coordinating group. We are now going to be treated with a song from Dr. Kim R. Harris. She is the Assistant Professor of African American Thought and Practice in Theological Studies at Loyola Marymount University in Los Angeles. She holds a PhD in Worship and the Arts from Union Theological Seminary in the city of New York. So it is an honor to have her, just as we had Arne earlier, sharing a song with us. Welcome, Dr.
Thank
Kim.
you. Thank you. Thank you. Now, I know everybody's on mute and all, but that doesn't mean that you cannot sing along. Just keep it on mute, but keep your voice going. Well, I woke up this morning with my mind stayed on freedom. Oh yeah, I woke up this morning with your mind, yeah, stayed on freedom. I woke up this morning with my mind it was stayed on freedom. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. And then I woke up this morning with my mind, oh, it was stayed on voting. Oh yeah, I woke up this morning with my mind, it was stayed on voting. Yeah, I woke up this morning with my mind it was stayed on voting. Hallelujah, yeah, hallelujah, hallelujah. You gotta walk, you gotta walk, you gotta walk with your mind on freedom. Walk, yeah, walk, you gotta walk with your mind on freedom, yeah. Walk, you gotta talk, come on, talk, you gotta talk, go keep your mind on voting, talk, yeah, talk, you gotta talk, keep your mind on voting, oh, walk, yeah, talk, oh, well, I woke up this morning with my mind it was stayed on my voting, oh yeah, I woke up this morning with my mind, yeah, stayed on my voting, oh yeah, I woke up this morning with my mind it was stayed on voting, hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. You know that no one can stop you. Keep your mind, oh, stayed on your voting. Oh, no one can stop you. Keep your mind, keep it now. Stayed on your voting. Oh, no one can stop you. Keep your mind, keep it now. Stayed on your voting. Hallelujah, 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 hallelujah. All right, y'all.
Beautiful, beautiful. We're going to continue with the propositions and we're going to have Reverend Beth.
Thank you so much. That was amazing. I would have loved to seen everybody reacting to that song. Thank you, Kim. I'm talking about Prop 20. It's the Criminal Sentencing, Parole, and DNA Collection Initiative. What this proposition does is restricts parole for certain offenses currently considered to be nonviolent. It authorizes felony sentences for certain offenses currently treated only as misdemeanors. Prop 20 has 4 major provisions. It changes state law to increase criminal penalties for some theft-related crimes. It changes how people released from state prison are supervised in the community. It makes various changes to the processes that were created by Prop 57 and other initiatives that had happened in the past for considering the release of inmates from prison. And it requires state and local law enforcement to collect DNA from adults convicted of certain crimes. The ballot initiative would make specific types of theft and fraud crimes. It would basically take crimes that were misdemeanors, make them felonies. It would require persons convicted of certain misdemeanors before 2014, such as shoplifting, drug possession, to submit DNA samples. And it restricts parole for certain offenses currently considered nonviolent. It authorizes felony sentences for certain offenses currently treated only as misdemeanors. Now, what a yes vote on this does is it adds those crimes to categorizing that makes it a punitive or what is being called a crime scam. A vote no opposes this initiative. So who endorses this position? California Correctional Peace Officers, California Grocery Association, California Bankers Association, California Growers Association. What opponents say is California already tried to lock them up and throw away the key strategy, and it didn't cut crime. It exploded the state's prisons budget. It tore countless families apart. And that's why voters have consistently backed reforms that give all but the most serious offenders a chance to rehabilitate themselves. This year, with more focus than ever before on how the penal system disproportionately harms Black and Latino Americans, it is no time to revert back to a tried and failed approach. Those who oppose this proposition are the ACLU, the Public Defenders Association, the California Teachers Association, SEIU, California, the Chief Probation Officers of California, California Partnership to End Domestic Violence. So you can see, you can make up your mind, vote at your conscience, but we also want to make sure that everyone understands the far-reaching implications of this proposition.
Thank you, Reverend Beth. My name is Faye Wilson Kennedy. I'm one of the co-chairs based out of Sacramento, and I'm going to spend a few moments with you today talking about Proposition 21, also known as rent control. It expands local government authority to enact rent control on residential property, and you should see something on your screen. This measure would expand local government's power to pass rent control laws. If this sounds familiar, it's a replay from 2018. It failed and now it's back again. Who endorses this particular proposition? The Jewish Action Group, Courage California, the Dolores Huerta Foundation, Housing Now, the California League of United Latino American Citizens, United Auto Workers, various unions, various tenants group out of the Bay Area, and the California Environmental Justice Alliance. Opposition to this particular proposition, it centers around rent control is not the answer to the housing crisis. Opponents say we need policies that encourage housing access and affordability. The various groups and individuals who oppose this: Governor Gavin Newsom, Affordable Housing, California Council of Affordable Housing, California Housing Consortium, Bridge Housing, California Revitalization and Community Corporation, Barrier Housing Advocacy Coalition. And what we are asking all of you to do is conduct your research and then vote on what's best for you and your family and your community. And thank you very much. And now I'm passing it on to Michaela.
Okay, Michaela.
Michaela, you're muted. We can't hear you.
Got it.
There you go.
Hi, my name is Michaela Edwards. I am an Uber driver and a leader with the advocacy group We Drive Progress. I'm here to talk to you about Proposition 22. In the middle of a pandemic, Uber, Lyft, DoorDash, Instacart, Postmates have spent $185 million on their ballot initiative, Proposition 22, which is now the most expensive ballot initiative in history. All to classify rideshare drivers as app-based delivery workers as independent contractors. Under current law, gig workers are employees and have been since January 1st, 2020, under Assembly Bill 5. However, gig companies have refused to follow the law and have been sued multiple times by city attorneys and the California Attorney General. If Proposition 22 passes, the gig companies funding it will be carved out of Assembly Bill 5. It would push things backwards for drivers, and we've been organizing to move forward. Uber, Lyft, and other gig companies are paying $185 million to pay drivers less. Proposition 22 would take away rideshare drivers' basic employee rights, like sick leave, workers' comp, unemployment insurance, family leave. We would be paid 20% of minimum wage, but not for the 1/3 of time that drivers spend waiting for rides. We could earn less than $6 an hour after expenses. They say Proposition 22 offers health care, but it's a stipend that only covers 82% of the lowest level of state-sponsored plan, with high deductibles and co-pays, and only for full-time drivers based on engaged time. If passed, Proposition 22 would bar local governments from increasing wages or benefits for drivers and can only be amended by 7/8 of California legislator. Let's take a second to talk about minutes and set the record straight. According to research conducted by UC Santa Cruz, a majority of gig workers work full-time, with 71% working more than 30 hours a week, 50% working more than 40 hours a week, and 30% working more than 50 hours a week. 20% of gig workers earn $0 after expenses of gas, insurance, and maintenance for our cars. 15% of gig workers have to rely on public assistance to make ends meet. Gig work is work that is predominantly done by Black, Brown, and immigrant workers who have been especially hit hard during the pandemic because so many have to continue working and risk their health. Over the years, gig companies have taken more and more from drivers' earnings and to keep their profits, leading drivers to drive more and earn less. Commercials for Proposition 22 say that drivers prefer flexibility, but there's nothing flex about working 12 hours to make ends meet and napping in your car before the next ride. There's also nothing in California labor law that says employees can't have flexible schedules. Uber, Lyft are the ones threatening to take away flexibility. Drivers are getting bombarded daily by political messages in the apps we use for work and threatening our jobs if we don't vote yes. While these companies claim to be leaders in technology, there's nothing new or innovative or groundbreaking about this type of worker exploitation. Gig work is real work and is essential. We are hardworking mothers, fathers, sons, daughters. We deserve to earn a fair wage for all of our work and to have access to benefits given to California employees, to all of them. We don't deserve to have our rights taken away because billionaires are trying to buy democracy. Thank you.
Thank you. Melissa? I think Trudy, you're next.
Good afternoon. I want to talk just briefly to you about Proposition 25. This is a pretty complex proposition that's on the ballot. So I want you to go back with me to a time when folks were advocating for SB 10, which originally was intended to help folks that are in prison that don't have money to bail out to be able to get out without having to put their house up for as equity. or as you know, to finance getting out of jail with using their house, the equity in their house. What happened though was that that bill was transformed into something that allowed the courts to decide who would get out of jail and who wouldn't. And what they did was to move low-level offenses and misdemeanors to a position where they could be looked at as reasons to keep people in jail. So by using certain data and algorithms, the judges and law enforcement are now able to determine that folks can stay in jail, they can keep people in jail because of how the courts are viewing what their past histories are, what their zip codes are. Think of it like this. If a person had missed a court date because they didn't have childcare and they returned to court for another crime, the judge has no way of telling whether that person had a problem, the reason that they missed the court date, or if they were actually trying to skip out on bail. Or if a person was up for a felony charge, but they had had a previous felony, the judge isn't able to tell whether or not that felony was a murder or not. So they habitually will deny bail based on these algorithms that are racially biased against people of certain zip codes, of races, of areas that they live in. So at this time, when our national conscience demands for us to reform the criminal justice system, along comes Proposition 25, a short-sighted and cruel bill that demands of the people and the communities who have suffered at the hands of law enforcement under a cash bail system to now put their trust in judges and law enforcement in the same system that has criminalized them and kept them in jail for all of these decades. So we're asking you to vote no on Prop 25. Give the people of California a chance to go back and build a better system to allow folks who are nonviolent and who don't have criminal records of committing crimes on people an opportunity to continue working and be a member of their society until they're able to go to court. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, everybody, it's Melissa. I just wanted to remind you that if you can and would like to donate, you can go to the California Poor People's Campaign GoFundMe page or send a check out to the fiscal sponsor Etina, E-T-I-N-A, at 2010 Linden Avenue, Venice, California, 90291, and the information will be in the chat. Thank you.
All right, and this is Margaret. We are Prescott. We're now to welcome Madison Ashley, one of our national organizers here in California, and Nell Myhand, who's also a co-chair of the Poor People's Campaign in California. Welcome to both of you, and they're going to let you know some of the things you can do.
Thank you so much, Margaret. Since the launch of the MORE campaign nationally in early September 2020, we have mobilized, we've organized, we've registered and educated our communities in unprecedented ways. We know that the urgent work that we do leading up to the election is still the work and the commitment of building a long-term base of poor and low-income voters in this country. That is why we are doing work on the ground among our communities to do more this election season. A few of our biggest and most outstanding victories so far is Through our phone and text banks, we've contacted over 400,000 poor and low-income, infrequent voters from 8 target states where their votes can have the most impact. We anticipate that by November 3rd, we will have contacted over 1 million. We have 2,260 folks who are registered as poll monitors to safeguard the ballot and bear witness in our target states on election day. And we have over 740 folks who are trained to have conversations within their own communities about getting out the vote. We would love to have you take part in these efforts. You can sign up on our website for one of our virtual and phone bank, text bank gatherings that we offer weekly. If you live in one of our target states, you can sign up as an election day poll monitor, and you can sign up to take our prophetic pledge as a person of faith who is doing more this election season.
Thank you, Madison. Now, Nell, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. So thank you, everybody. I am Nell Myhand, and have the honor to serve as a co-chair of the California Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival. And as you may know, we are nonpartisan, but we're deeply political. And so we have been working in the state of California, throughout the state, to get out the vote. And we started actually following the lead of the Los Angeles Policy and Education Working Group that developed these materials that I'm going to show. And it started with a focus on the census and the vote, and get out the vote, register and get out the vote. And so they developed those materials in English and Spanish. And over the course of a few weeks, we were able to enlist the help of dozens of volunteers throughout the state. And we actually delivered around 15,000 door hangers and cards to various places. So these are some of the places where we were able to deliver the door hangers. We had the help of some of our partner organizations, including the NAACP in Fairfield, Suisun, and Vacaville. And in the Inland Empire, we had help. You know, we're an intergenerational, we're a moral fusion movement and intergenerational. And so we have help from young people and we have help from elders. And so here in Sacramento, we had people who were handing out the cards in that neighborhood. And here in the San Francisco Bay Area, we handed out door knockers, San Jose. And then we have a second printing that's focused specifically on get out the vote. And as was mentioned earlier, tomorrow is the last day to register. So even if you're registered, please tell people around you who may not be registered to register to vote. And so the new voting materials are focused specifically on the vote. And we were able to have those materials printed in English and Spanish and Korean. And so we want to thank the LA Policy Working Group for their leadership. And this is how you can contact us. We've dropped those links in the chat. Feel free to reach out to us if you want to become involved in one of the regions. We have steering committees in Inland Empire, San Francisco Bay Area, San Diego, Sacramento, Orange County, and Los Angeles. And we're building new regional steering committees in other parts of the state where folks don't have that structure yet. And so we encourage you to join us if you haven't already. And we want to thank the PPC LA Policy and Education Working Group for their leadership. Thank you.
Thank you, Nell.
You're welcome.
We have a video now requested. Reverend Barbara is coming up. Don't go anywhere.
I worked 41 years in the coal mines. I have black lung, and it's just unfathomable what these poor coal miners have to go through in order to get what they have worked for and deserve.
At one time, poverty was a temporary condition. You were on a down slope for a minute, but you could bounce back up. We can't bounce back up today. It's permanent. We're not going back to the factory and building cars and trucks like we once did.
A job working at McDonald's or the grocery store doesn't pay enough for one person to live.
We work a 40-hour work week, still not enough. Living from paycheck to paycheck. Rent is $600 a month. We got water bill, electricity. I do this for my kids, and it hurts.
I'm 46 years old. I've lived in poverty here in West Virginia every day of my life. And I'm working. I am working poor with a bachelor's degree. I'm doing the best I can with what I have.
We were in the height of mass water shutoffs. This entire neighborhood was shut off all at one time.
I saw all my neighbors get shut off right in front of me. It was kind of terrifying.
I'm 42 years old, and I'm a cashier at McDonald's. I had lost my house. You're welcome to come inside. There's a lot of people that are living in their cars. You never notice until you're in the same situation.
I don't have stuff to give my children. I'm paying all these bills, and they need school clothes and stuff. They be asking me for, I can't give it to them.
Now I'm a Kansas farmer's wife. Kansas farmers are committing suicide. Why? They're usually in debt up to their eyeballs.
I see poverty in my own community. You know, there's a 70% unemployment rate in the reservation right now.
Here in New York City, we're home to millionaires and billionaires, and we have so many people living in the street, and that's just not right.
I've been a homeless veteran twice, lived in a shelter.
I've been living down here since I was 17.
My only chance of going to college was joining the Army. We are demanding that we stop the war on our poor.
700,000 people in this country are on the verge of losing their food stamps.
This budget calls for shrinking the social safety net programs like Medicare.
I just know that everything that's happening to us isn't right.
I'm in stage 5 of kidney disease. I fell behind on my health care, and they canceled my health insurance, and they told me I have to wait until open enrollment. There's only 5 stages of kidney disease, and I'm in the 5th stage. Murder, it's murder. You know, if you ask me, it's murder.
I lost a son to gun violence, and I lost a daughter.
No parent in America should have to bury their child for a lack of medicated space.
I'm wailing because my children
My God.
are no more.
My God. My God, Kelly.
I'm wailing. I'm wailing, y'all. I'm wailing. Because my babies ain't no more. How many more babies? How many more children? No more.
Wow. Well, this is Margaret Prescott, and now a moment that we all have been anxiously waiting for. You have some terrific information on voting, and I'd now like to introduce, it is my pleasure to introduce the Reverend Dr. William Joseph Barber II. He is president and senior lecturer of Repairers of the Breach, co-chair of the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival. He is with the Fellowship of Affirming Ministries, where he is the bishop. He's visiting professor at Union Theological Seminary, pastor of Greenleaf Christian Church, Disciples of Christ in Goldsboro, North Carolina, and is the author of 4 books. We Are Called to Be a Movement, Revive Us Again, Vision and Action in Moral Organizing, The Third Reconstruction, Moral Mondays, Fusion Politics, and the Rise of a New Justice Movement, and Forward Together, a Moral Message for the Nation. Reverend Barber is also the architect of the Moral Movement, which began with weekly Moral Monday protests at the North Carolina General Assembly in 2013 and recently relaunched again online in August 2020 under the banner of the Poor People's Campaign. In 2018, Reverend Dr. Barber helped relaunch the Poor People's Campaign, which was begun by the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. in 1968, starting with an historic wave of protests in state capitals and in Washington, D.C., calling for a moral agenda and a moral budget to address the 5 interlocking injustices of systemic racism, systemic poverty, the war economy and militarism, ecological devastation, and the false moral narrative of Christian nationalism. There are currently 45 state coordinating committees across the country mobilizing around the Poor People's Campaign Jubilee platform, and we must do more. It stands for mobilize, organize, register, and educate for a movement that votes. On June 20, 2020, some 2.5 million people tuned in on Facebook alone for the campaign's Mass Poor People's Assembly and Moral March on Washington, which was scheduled as an in-person event, but switched to digital because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Thousands of others watch and listen on C-SPAN and other media. He is a highly sought after speaker, so we're delighted that he's able to be with us today. Reverend Dr. Barber has given keynote addresses at hundreds of national and state conferences, including the 2016 Democratic National Convention. He has spoken to a wide variety of audiences, including national unions, fraternities and sororities, motorcycle organizations, drug dealer redemption conferences, women's groups, economic policy groups, voting rights advocates, LGBTQ equality and justice groups, environmental and criminal justice groups, small organizing committees of domestic workers, of fast food workers, and national gatherings of Christians, Muslims, Jews, and other people of faith. Reverend Dr. Barber served as president of the North Carolina NAACP, the largest state conference in the South, from 2006 to 2017, and he currently sits on the National NAACP Board of Directors. He is a former Mel King Fellow at MIT, currently visiting Professor of Public Theology and Activism at Union Theological Seminary, and is a Senior Fellow at Auburn Seminary. Reverend Dr. Barber is regularly featured in media outlets such as MSNBC, CNN, The New York Times, Washington Post, and The Nation magazine, among others. He is the 2015 recipient of the Puffin Award and the Franklin D. Roosevelt for Freedoms Award. He is a 2018 MacArthur Foundation Genius Award recipient, and he is one of the 2019 recipients of the North Carolina Award, the state's highest civilian honor. It is my pleasure to welcome and introduce the Reverend Dr. William Joseph Barber.
Sister Prescott, thank you, Margaret, so much for a gracious introduction. You know, at the end of the day, I've tried to be what my parents said we ought to be, and that is a servant among servants. I'm so thankful to be in the midst with you and Faye Kennedy and Rose Escobar and Nell Mahan and Reverend Beth Johnson. I'm doing this by a picture this evening because I had a little problem with one of my computers and the glass broke on the camera. And I hope you all will forgive me for that. I was thinking as you were reading through the bio, you know, and when you do all that stuff, at least what it ended up for me, it got me arrested 14 times and put it in the paddy wagon. and in jail. In fact, I was in handcuffs the day that they called about the MacArthur Award. I was sitting on a bus in handcuffs with workers, fast food workers in Chicago. And somebody happened to have kept their phone, and they said, "We just heard." I said, "Heard what?" And they said, "Did you guys, well, what is that?" I didn't even know what it was. And I said, oh, well, can it help us get off this bus out of these handcuffs? They said, no. I said, well, we'll worry about that later then. I think I remember, if I'm not mistaken, I don't know if you traveled, were you there when we did the big labor piece over in England? I know some years ago I was there, and I remember meeting you that night in Compton when we came here building from the bottom up. And you said those words I've never forgotten, that I've been waiting 40 years for us to take up again, not just the call of Dr. King, but of Cesar Chavez and and Rabbi Heschel, and most of all, the welfare rights women. Let's tell the truth. If it had not been for the women, welfare rights women who demanded that there be a poor people's campaign that featured and focused on the poor from the bottom up, there would not have been the first iteration. And here we are again today, engaged, using both the strategy from the 1860s, the first Reconstruction, and from the 1960s, with a remix into this modern day structure. Whatever little bit we are, it is because of the people. And I'm so honored. I'm so honored also to be serving as the co-servant leaders of this campaign with Reverend Dr. Liz Theo-Harris. You know, it is not my mistake that, you know, I'm an African-American who also has Caucasian heritage and Native indigenous heritage, raised in the South, who went to segregated schools, who's serving as co-chair along with a Armenian woman. And if you know the story and the history of the Armenian people and their battle with genocide, and even their having to fight just to be properly named in America. Two people who are both clergy, both in the seminary and academy, but also have spent most of our lives working with the people and learning from the people and being in the streets. It's amazing to me to be able to serve in this way. I also just want to say a shout out to everybody who's listening, everybody, and all of us who are building this campaign, this organism from the bottom up. And as we're in the middle of this campaign called We Must Do More, and I hope after my remarks, you'll play that last video called The Demands right at the end, because I'm not going to do a whole lot of talking. My mother and my grandmother used to have a saying, there's a time to do the talking and then there's a time to do the walking. And we're in a time now to do the walking. There's a scripture in the Bible, 1 John, in the epistle of 1 John, and it simply says, this is the victory, even our faith. I love that text because it does not say we only have victory when we have won an election, or we only have victory when we have all the money we need or all the political power, social power we need. It says that people, and this was written to people in the Bible who were oppressed and who were fighting against oppression and standing against empire. It says the first victory is even our faith. Our faith to believe, first of all, that our stories have power. Did you all just see that Power and Pain video, starting with that black man, the white man from
West Virginia, from Kentucky, coal miner, and ending with the cries and the wailings of a Black woman from Alabama. And now these two people who 3 years ago didn't even know each other were in the world. They didn't even know each other existed. And now they are brothers and sisters in this movement, believing that their story has power. This is the victory, even our faith. It's a victory to have the faith that we can organize across all the lines that have divided us. You know, sometimes people have spent so much time believing the lies of division that people lose hope, lose faith that we can sit at the table. We don't have to be at different tables, and we can deal straight up with racism and in all of its forms toward Black people, toward our Latino brothers and sisters, toward immigrants of color, toward indigenous people. And we can deal with systemic poverty and ecological devastation and denial of health care, the war economy, and the false moral narrative of religious nationalism. We can be together. We can have grown-up framing and conversation. We can do moral analysis, moral articulation, moral activism. We can put together a moral agenda together, and to have the faith to even start doing that is the victory. Even before it gets done, just the faith to be doing it is the victory. Our faith is that we have agency. This is the victory, even our faith, that poor and low wealth people and their moral allies and advocates, we have agency, we have power. We are not weak. We are not to be dismissed. And I want to come back to that in a moment. But this is the victory, even our faith. Our faith that 3 years ago, we believed we could build from the bottom up. I wish I could tell you how many times, Margaret, people said it won't work. You can't go and build from the bottom up. You got to start at the top. In order to build a national thing, you got to get all the people together that have national organizations and start in DC. But we knew from history that movements start from San Francisco up, Montgomery up, Birmingham up, Oakland up, Montgomery up, not so much from DC down. And to have the faith, that is the victory, even our faith, that we could build from the bottom up. Faith is the victory when we have the faith that we don't have to accept the mythologies anymore. The mythology that we don't have enough resources in this country, the mythology that the only way you can do it is to raise taxes, when that's not necessarily a bad thing if you raise it on the right folk, but the mythology that we don't already have the money needed to address the public policy issues that face us. With just the faith to believe that is in itself victory. The faith to refuse the allegiances that too often people have given themselves over to. Faith is the victory. And you know, we did not know we would be in the middle of COVID 3 years after the beginning of the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival. We did not know we would be in the middle of COVID, where every public health official worth their weight in gold will tell you that there are 3 things that enable the pandemic. One of them has been the inept, almost and criminal response of the White House, the presidency, and the Senate, and McConnell and others. But the other 2 things are systemic racism and systemic poverty, because those 2 realities create the fissures that through which a pandemic can live and breathe and spawn and continue to have power. And 3 years ago, most of us didn't even know each other. Now we're like brothers and sisters, but we didn't even know that we would be in the middle of COVID. But God did, the universe did. And by faith, we started. And I don't know, I wouldn't want to be in the middle of this COVID without a Poor People's Campaign family. I wouldn't want this nation to be where it is now without having what you all are doing to be clear about what must be done, not just now, but for in the future. Maybe the universe knew we needed 3 years ago this working together for this moment. It might even be that everything we've done up to this moment, we didn't know it, but faith knew it, that it was 3 years of rehearsal. Because if America ever needed a Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival, is now, because there's no way fully out of this COVID without this country coming to grips with dealing with the issue of poverty and low wealth and systemic racism and all of the other injustices that are literally trying to strangle the life out of the possibility of a genuine democracy. And so this is the victory, even our faith. And I'm so glad that we are together by faith, faith believing that things don't have to be this way, faith in believing that the world can be better, that we don't have to have the inequities we have in the wealthiest country in the entire world, faith to believe that we can, in fact, challenge the powers that be. We will challenge the powers that be. Faith to know that we won't be silent anymore. We can't be silent anymore because too many people are hurting. Faith like the faith of Pamela Rush, who you saw in that video, who told me when we first visited her in Alabama, she said, I want you to come in my house. I want you to see the rodents. I want you to see the mold. I want you to see what payday lenders did to me. I want you to see my children who have to have CPAP machines, who are under 13 years of age because of the way poverty. And she said, I want you to see it. And if you need me, I'll go to DC. I've never been, but I'll testify because I want other folk to stand up like me. And she had faith. And then COVID hit and she was caught in the middle of COVID with racial disparities and poverty. And even as she was sick, she was sending messages back saying, if I leave, Reverend Barber, don't y'all stop this movement. This movement has to continue. And she made sure that she, by faith, she taped her remarks that she gave on June 20th because she didn't know if she would still be physically with us on June 20th. And she died a week later. But before she died, Pamela laid down a legacy of faith and said that was victory, because she said to me one day, choosing to stand up, choosing to get involved with this campaign, choosing to say my name is conditioned poor in front of the whole world was the first victory, Reverend Barber. And thank you, thank this movement. You know, Moral Fusion is our way of organizing, because Pamela became good friends with Amy Jo in West Virginia, two people that the Southern Strategy over the years since '68 had spent time dividing, but they came together. And Moral Fusion organizing is our way, not silo organizing, where this group gets over here in this corner and this group's in another corner. No, we not silo. And in this moment, all of our focus now is on more. We must do more, mobilizing, organizing, registering, educating people for the movement who vote. Because we said, beginning this campaign, we were going to do two things well: change the narrative, three things: change the narrative, put a face on the pain and the problems, and three, build power. Build power, build power, nonviolent power, political power, voting power. And right now, all of our focus is on we must do more. Poor and low wealth people in this country must do more in terms of making them hear us. There's a great song from the 1920s entitled, Make Them Hear You, and 1930s, excuse me. And we are call now to make them hear us, even in the process of voting in this country. And yes, this year, but in the years to come. And yes, after the election, we will still make people hear us. But right now, our entire focus, we agreed, is we have the agenda, the moral, jubilee, justice, poverty agenda. We have the budget, we have the data. But we must now, for all of our focus on more, and we must be disciplined. You know, sometimes, Sister Prescott, people forget how our greatest victories came in the past. I don't have time to go through all of them, but I want to implore those on this call to sometimes go back and read how everything that we hold dear as revolutionaries and progressives, if you will, today, though every victory, every piece of policy that we hold dear 100 years ago was seen as impossible. Some of them 50 years ago. And every one of them, there was a campaign, not just a tweet, not just a march, but a campaign. And every one of them required also, along with moral campaigns, voting to shift who was in office in order to begin to put more people in place that would move public policy. And whether it's the bonus marches of the 1920s, or whether it's the women's suffrage marches and moving and policy shaping, all of them had components. There was a time to march and a time to vote. Even women's suffrage, when they couldn't vote, they pushed others who could vote to vote certain ways. They put pressure on those who could. They knew that they had to have the franchise. The same thing in the civil rights movement and with the right to vote for Black people. But my point is discipline. There are times you have to have discipline as a movement. You have to have a learned discipline. We're going to do this so powerful that it will be unmistaken. Nobody will be able to mistake that we were in the game, that we were there, that we helped move and make things different. You know, it was 381 days was the Montgomery bus boycott. Not one day, not one rally, 381 days. In Milwaukee, Wisconsin, Father James Gropey and others, it was 5 years between 63 and 68. They had demonstrations in the city, 5 years, nonviolently, protesting segregation in housing and schools, filed a lawsuit against city ordinances. And then finally, in 68, they had victories and the passage of the fair housing legislation. But I want you to, and ended legal segregation in the state's largest city. But it was 5 years, 63 to 68. And then it was from July all the way to August, 60 some days, 1975, Cesar Chavez to educate workers about their newly won rights. 1,000-mile march, 1,000 mile, 59 days from the Mexican border to San Ysidro, north along the coast of the Salinas, and then from Sacramento down the Central Valley. 59 days. By faith, this is the victory, even our faith. And what did Brother Caesar teach us? He said, history will judge societies and governments and their institutions not by how big they are or how well they serve the rich and the powerful, but how they effectively respond to the needs of the poor and the helpless. And then he said this, once social change begins, it cannot be reversed. You cannot uneducate the person who has learned to read. You cannot humiliate the person who feels pride. You cannot oppress the people who are not afraid anymore. This is the victory, even our faith. When you have faith, you're no longer afraid. And that's why in this campaign, we've spent so much time just learning the truth and letting go of the lies and the mythology and having the agenda and knowing what the facts are and spending time with each other and having various campaigns that to others it may not have seemed like this or that, but for us, it was a way of moving and acting together and learning how to move in moral fusion. Even while we may have our silos, in this place, we move together in moral fusion. Why? Because, as Caesar said, you cannot stop social change, reverse it once it has begun. You cannot oppress people who are not afraid anymore. Somebody's hurting our brothers and sisters, gone on far too long, and we won't be silent. We're not afraid. We won't be silent anymore. One part of this movement is to bring people together, not to be afraid anymore, and to do more, and so let me talk about this doing more. Let me talk one more time about what it means to move by faith. There was a guy named Henry Highland Garnett, 1843, Margaret. He was a 27-year-old Black preacher, Presbyterian preacher. He stood up in 1843 and said to slaves, even in slavery, you got to decide who's going to be your master, slavery or God. And then he said, listen, our motto must be resistance, resistance, resistance. He said, we have freedom, and liberty is a spirit that has been sent out from God. It's in us. And you cannot secure freedom, you cannot secure justice without resistance. And then he went on to say, trust in the living God, labor for the peace of the human race, and remember that you are 4 millions. That's how he ended it. He said, remember that you are 4 million. Now, this is 1843. This is 18 years before the Civil War. This is 14 years before the Dred Scott decision that declared a Black man has no rights that a white person has to abide by. This is 1843. And this 27-year-old Black man said to slaves and said to Black people in this country, he was speaking in Troy, New York in 1843. He said, remember that you are 4 millions. And that 4 millions meant that's how many African Americans were in the United States at that time. And he said, remember that you are 4 millions. He said, I know there's slavery. I know there are problems. I know that the government is arraigned right now against you, but don't ever see yourself as small. Have the faith to know who you are and remember that you are millions. It's time now, y'all. We've cried and we may still cry. We've hurt and people are hurting. But in the midst of all of this, we've also got to now to have resistance. We've got to change some things, and it's got to happen, begin happening at the ballot box. And I'll talk about that in a minute, what that means. But we have to, even in this moment of COVID, remember, California, that you are 21.4 million. That's the number of poor and low wealth people in California. No small drop in the bucket. It's a shame that that number is that number, but it's also a sign of your power. It's who we can organize. 21.4 million residents. If they hear the right call and if we keep being disciplined, that 21.4 million, if just 2% of it gets really organized, it can fundamentally change things. Remember, you are 21.4 million. Remember, you are 5.9 million children. Remember, you are 11 million women. Remember, you are 15 million people of color. Remember, you are 6 million white people. Remember, California. Remember, as we resist, as we fight, as we stand, as we vote, remember. Remember that you are 3 million uninsured. That's why we have to have this campaign. That's why we organize. That's why we call people together, regardless of their race, their creed, their color. Remember, you are 6 million people working without a living wage. Yes, those numbers are atrocious, but those numbers also point to power. We're not grasshoppers in the face of giants. We are powerful. Remember, nationally, we are 140 million, 43% of this nation. And in COVID now, it's going to be over 50%. This nation must address, and we must ensure that, remember, we are 140 million. Remember, when it comes to voting, there are 64 million poor and low wealth voters now in this country. That's 1/3 of the electorate. We cannot accept being unheard. We cannot refuse to be engaged. That much power has to be used. Remember, we are 64 million. 34 million didn't vote last time, 29 million did. We just did a study called Voting Unleashed, Voting is Power Unleashed, looking at the power of poor and low wealth people. And you know what the study showed us? If poor and low wealth people just vote at the same level as people above $50,000 a year, poor and low wealth people can change who sits in every house, the state house, the congressional house, the White House. It doesn't even require 100%. Doesn't even require 80%, just the same level, around 65, 66, 68%. What did we find in that study? That in 15 states, poor and low wealth people, if they just voted from 1 to 19%, could change the makeup of the Senate and the Congress and state houses and the presidency. Just 1 to 19% across this country could fundamentally shift who makes the decision. And we can never forget that. And we can't abdicate that. I know I'm in California, but I want to talk to you a little bit about what's also happening, because you are part of this campaign and all of us mean something. And what you do in California inspires people in Mississippi and so forth and so on. And so you're starting to hear these reports now. They're saying things like South Carolina's in play, Georgia, North Carolina, Mississippi, Kansas. And sometimes when I see the TV, I laugh because they say these states, suddenly something's happening. Well, for years now, the demographics have shown us. The problem has not been that extremists are winning. The problem has been that people who believe in transformation, revolution, and progress, and radical movement and revival have sometimes either been divided from one another or have not voted. Our studies said that there are 3 reasons people didn't vote. Poor and low wealth people. Number 1, they never hear their issues. Number 2, they can't get off work and transportation. Number 3, voter suppression. But in the midst of COVID, what is happening is some people are saying, wait a minute, the politicians may not call our name, but we're gonna call our own name. We're gonna vote ourselves. We're gonna vote our agenda. We're gonna make them hear us. And so now, because of that, you're seeing shiftings in places we were told shifting was impossible. I just want to give you that field report, California. I want to give you that field report because you are 21 million. You are 55% of the people in California poor and low wealth. You are the majority, and it's time for that power to speak. You are 65% of the children in your state poor and low wealth. It's time for them to speak. 57% of all the women are poor and low wealth. It's time for them to speak. 66% of all people of color are poor and low wealth. It's time for us to speak political power. Like Henry Highland Garnett said, remember who you are. Remember who you are. Poor and low wealth people, by the strange twist and turn of history, now make up 1/3 of the electorate in this country. And it won't be long before it'll be a half. Now, I don't say that to say that that's a good thing. I say that that says we have power to start changing that reality. We have power to move, particularly through the vote in other ways, to begin to shift that reality. We are not weak. And what you're going to see in this election is when the data comes in, the world is going to see just how powerful we are. Your campaign is targeting some states that can make it better for everybody, right? They make it better for everybody. That's how we think as a campaign. We think about how what we do in Mississippi can make it better for California. Don't you know if we could elect progressive senator from Mississippi and Georgia and North Carolina and South Carolina and Kansas, it makes it better for the delegation in California. It makes it better in what we can push for. That's why millions of people are joining the campaign and are peer texting and calling people, poor and low wealth people who have felt isolated, that say, wait a minute, there's a campaign out here now that wants you, not just doesn't want your vote, wants you, wants to mobilize, organize, and register, educate you, because guess what? If all of us, the rejected, come together, we have power, not just moral power, not just feel-good power. We are California 21 million. We are Poor People's Campaign 140 million. We are, when it comes to those that already can vote right now, don't have to do anything else but vote, 64 million. We are more than was the margin of victory, was the total election of the current occupant of the White House. And just so I can kill another myth, the New York Times recently came out and said, stop lying on poor and low wealth people, and stop lying on poor and low wealth people in the South. Most poor and low wealth people, even in the South, white, black, otherwise, those that make less than $50,000 a year tend to vote more progressive, but it's the volume. We got to turn loose the volume, stop believing the lies, and remember that we are 140 million. We are California 21 million. We are, in the voting bloc, 64 million. And what do we do with this? What do we do with this power? We've got to use it now to change who is elected so we can push who is elected. Did you hear what I just said? Listen at the nuance now. Our campaign is not a naive campaign. We don't just change, we're not going to use all this power. We're not going to remember who we are to just change who is elected and go home. No, we already have an agenda, right? It's right. We have it right here. We already have it right here. We have it already done. And we're going to take a look at who's closest to it. They may not be making 100 right now. They may not make 80, but one group may make 0 and the other group may make 60 or 70. So we may make practical decisions. We're going to take the 60 and change who's elected, and then we're going to push them when they get elected, because we are 140 million.
That's right.
We are 21 million. We are 64 million. So we're not going anywhere. Our engagement in this electorate is very clear. We've got to have a psychic and a psychological and a political break from what we see now. Outright criminal policy murder, totally diametric to any sense of justice and attempt to address the real issues of poverty and low wealth. So sometimes when you have to use your vote to stop what is going on so you can start something else. Let me give it to you and I'm through, Margaret. 1964 was the election year. We're not there. This is a very different race. I just want to make the point. 1964, you had Lyndon Baines Johnson, who was a segregationist from the South, who had entered the presidency because Kennedy had been shot. He'd served a year. Now he was up for his first 4 term. He was running against Wallace and Barry Goldwater. The movement had to make a decision. Do we sit out and let Barry Goldwater get in? No. Do we sit out and let George Wallace get in? No. Barry Goldwater had already said what he would do, probably lead us to nuclear war. Wallace had said segregation yesterday, today, and tomorrow. We already knew what he was doing. They had Lyndon Baines Johnson. So the movement said, we're going to engage. This was before the Voting Rights Act. They engaged, put Lyndon Baines Johnson in office, and then 65 marched on him. 64, they stopped Goldwater, stopped Wallace. 65, Selma 65 was the Selma to Montgomery, wasn't an election year, but the people elected to change the political atmosphere because they needed a Voting Rights Act to further the hopes and the dreams of the movement. They decided who was elected and then who they would push after they got them elected. And so we're real clear. We endorse our ideas and our issues. We have our own personal endorsement as a campaign. We're clear. and we are clear that we aren't going anywhere and we aren't sitting out. We must do more. And we're no longer going to accept or say, well, we're not going to be engaged until they call us our name. The hell with that. We're going to make them hear us. That's where we are now. Make them hear us. And we're going to make a sound at the ballot box that when it's all done and that people do their analysis, post-election analysis, they're going to have to say, wait a minute. Something happening different here in Mississippi, California, and Carolina. We never seen this block of people turning out like this. What's going on? And we're going to say, excuse me, we are 140 million. We are 64 million. And we will be heard. We will be heard because we are 1/3 of the entire electorate. Too many of us anyway, but since you allowed it to get this big, America, now you're going to have to deal with us. We are California, 21 million. We are Poor People's Campaign, 140 million. We are 64 million. Resistance, revival, moral fusion. We aren't going anywhere. We are going to believe in a new world. And this is the victory, even our faith. We must have health care. We must have living wages. We must have guaranteed income. We must have clean water, clean air. We must take care of, deal with every aspect of racism, police brutality, yes, but all of it. Desegregation of school, voter suppression, mass incarceration, the refusal to give our indigenous people the full nation status they deserve with all the benefits, proper treatment of our Latino and other people of color immigrants. Oh, yes. We must take money from this massive, ungodly military budget and put it into infrastructure, education, and healthcare. We must challenge. We will challenge. We can do better than religious nationalism and nativism that has never served us well in the past or serving us well in the present. We can have a new world. We are 140 million. We are 21 million. We are 64 million. And we won't be silent in the streets, in the ballot box, or in the suites anymore. That is my charge to you. And I hope you'll listen to this last video that shows us the vision and the demands and see all of the diversity. And be reminded that California, you got family everywhere now, all over the country. And we're building together. And this is the victory, even our faith that things will change. Even in the midst of all this hurt of COVID, right now in the midst of this pain, we're going to say to America, this is the time to deal with what you had with what you haven't dealt with. Right now, in the midst of COVID, is the time to address poverty and systemic racism. Right now. And we are 140 million. And we won't accept anything less. Y'all, it's time to do more. Mobilize, organize, register, and educate everybody you know to vote. America's never seen it happen. America doesn't even know what it looks like for 80% of people to vote. So why don't we make America see what that looks like? America doesn't know what it's like to see 75% of poor and low wealth people vote and be heard. Why don't we make America have to see what she's never seen so that we can see our way to a better future and a better tomorrow and a more just and genuine democracy. God bless you all. Margaret, thank you so much. Love to every one of you. We are 140 million and we will be heard.
Wow, Reverend Dr. Barber, thank you so very much. We are all so moved. We know what your day has been like, and I meant every word when I met you. in Los Angeles and said many of us have waited more than 4 decades for this movement. And at that time, none of us knew it would become the largest and most vibrant movement across the United States, bringing people together across races, across movements, and urban and rural. Forward together, not one step back. But Reverend Barber, what we're going to do now is play this video so people will know more about our demands. And we also want to put up in the chat, please, vote.ppc.org, vote.ppc.org. And Reverend Barber, I wish you could hear all of the enthusiasm from our audience right now. Let us go right to that video. We appreciate you. We love you. Thank you so very much for everything, all of the inspiration and the history and all of your words. Thank you. Let's go to that video now.
What happens in Wall Street often doesn't say a thing about what's happening on the real streets of America.
Everybody has a right to live.
The Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival, has come up with a series of demands.
I know that you are here for the same reasons we all are here, to put our elected official on notice.
The pain and the discontent is real, and the demands of our movement are moral.
We know what we want to focus on. Our agenda is clear.
We demand an immediate implementation of federal and state living wage laws. We demand the right for all workers to form and join unions. We demand equal pay for equal work. We demand a guaranteed annual income. We demand fully funded anti-poverty programs that protects the welfare of us all.
We demand the expansion of Medicaid in every state. We want single-payer universal health care, not for some, but for everybody.
An immediate restoration of the Voting Rights Act. We demand an end to racist gerrymandering.
We want early registration of 17 and 18-year-olds. We want registration to vote at age 18. If we can be drafted for war at 18, we ought to be able to vote automatically at 18. Early voting in every state, same-day registration, and the enactment of Election Day as a holiday.
We demand a reversal of state laws that prevent municipalities from raising minimum wage.
We demand an end to mass incarceration and the continuing inequalities of black, brown, and poor white people with the criminal justice system.
We demand the right to vote for the formerly incarcerated. A clear and just immigration system. This includes providing a timely citizenship process that guarantees the right to vote. The First Nation, Native American, and Alaskan Native people retain their tribal recognition as a nation, not a race.
We demand decent housing. We demand relief from crushing household, student, and consumer debt.
We demand
equity in education. We demand an end to the resegregation of schools. We demand free tuition at public colleges and universities and an end to profiteering on student debt. Equitable funding for historically black colleges and universities.
We demand the repeal of the 2017 federal tax law. And we demand that the wealthy and corporations pay their fair share.
We demand an end to military aggression and warmongering. We demand a stop to privatization of military budget and any increase in military spending. We demand a ban on assault rifles and a ban on the easy access of firearms. We demand an end to federal programs that send military equipment into local and state communities. We demand that the call to build a wall at the U.S.-Mexico border be ceased.
We demand a ban on fracking, mountaintop removal, coal mining, coal ash ponds, and offshore drilling. We demand a ban on all new pipelines, refineries, and coal, oil, and gas export terminals.
We are demanding that we stop the war on our poor.
Somebody's hurting my brother, somebody's hurting our sisters, and it's gone on far too long, and we won't be silent anymore.
We believe that we can win. We believe that we can win. We believe that everybody has a right to live.
I want you to know that when hands that once picked cotton join hands of Latinos, join hands of progressive whites, join faith hands and labor hands and Asian hands and Native American hands and poor hands and wealthy hands with a conscience and gay hands and straight hands and trans hands and Christian hands and Jewish hands and Muslim hands and Hindu hands and Buddhist hands. When we all get together, we are an instrument of redemption. When we join hands, we can revive and make sure that the promise of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness and equal protection under the law is never taken away from anybody. So I got a question. Are the rejected ready to revive and declare that this land is your land, this land is my land, this land is our land, and together from the State House to the White House, the rejected are going to demand that this nation never give up on being one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Wow, Melissa, that was quite something. Not one step back. As the rejected, we are ready to make this movement and come together. Melissa, what did you think?
I thought it was amazing.
Are you with us?
Yeah, I thought it was amazing. Thank you so much, Margaret, for putting this together. So inspiring. Time to get to work and do what we need to do.
That's right. And this was a very serious audience. I mean, people really stayed for the most part of very, very few people, I think maybe 7 or so throughout the whole event. So that says something in and of itself. So sadly, Melissa, we've now come to almost to the end of our program. What's coming up next? We want to thank everybody, by the way, the Melissa, you and everyone on the policy and education working group that worked so hard, that had this idea, the California coordinating committee that embraced it, the 4 co-chairs that embraced it. We want to thank Charmaine Fletcher. I worked closely with her on Reverend Barber's schedule, and Reverend Barber himself for joining us. And so we just want to thank everybody, Melissa. And we're now going to go so we can end the program. What's coming up next, Melissa?
We're going to end the program with our closing prayer by Colleen. Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa. It's been a pleasure working with you.
Thank you, Margaret and Melissa and Reverend Barber. Let's just all close our eyes in the spirit of this powerful message of hope and unity. With your eyes closed, imagine holding these hands of all of us here together virtually, but also across all of California, all of our regional organizing bodies, all of those that we have worked and labored and marched and protested and sang songs with and cried tears with. We are all connected. We are the 140 million. And I pray in the spirit of all our ancestors, those who have prayed over these lands years before we are here sitting on these grounds, gathered today, in all their names, the names of all our holy ones, that we would remember this message, that we would walk in faith and walk in power, and that we would never give up this fight for justice, that in fact, we have already won, as Reverend Barber reminded us so powerfully today. Thanks to all who organized this gathering, who knew this is exactly what we needed today. And it was, and it is so. In God's holy name we pray, amen and ashe.
Ashe. Thank you. Thanks everybody for joining us today. And remember, you can donate, you can get involved, you can hang out. Door hangs. We'll be getting an email out to you. I see a big smile from Faye Wilson Kennedy, one of our co-chairs there, Nell and Reverend Beth and Rose, everyone. We want to thank our ASL interpreters. We want to thank Ishmael, who did our Spanish language interpretation. And forward together, not one step back. We're going to build this movement. We're going to make it happen, aren't we?